I stood in my own driveway like a stranger casing a house that wasn't mine. Gary knelt at the front door, screwdriver in one hand, working the old deadbolt loose. Music thumped faintly behind the glass, bass heavy enough that I could feel it through the pavement. On my phone, paused mid-frame, was my sister's face, mouth open, mid-sentence, telling a camera that this house, my house, was hers. I hadn't gone inside yet. I wanted him to finish first. There is a particular kind of stillness that settles over you when you're watching someone perform a life that isn't theirs, in a room that is actually yours. You already know exactly how the scene ends. I wasn't loud, angry, standing there. I was counting how many minutes it would take one locksmith to erase 11 years of trust from a single door. Gary glanced up once, checking whether I wanted to go in yet. I shook my head. Not yet. Through the front window I could see her moving across my living room in slow, deliberate circles. Her phone was held high, tilted at the angle people use when they want strangers to envy their furniture. She turned, laughed at something only she could hear, and gestured toward the fireplace like a real estate agent closing a sale. She had no idea I was 20 feet away, standing beside a man who was, at that exact moment, quietly disassembling the only thing keeping her story alive. A rental car sat in my usual parking spot, backed in at an angle clearly chosen for the camera. Somebody had staged it there on purpose. I thought about walking up and knocking. I thought about calling her name through the glass. I imagined her spinning around mid-sentence, the performance cracking live in front of however many thousands of people were watching at that moment. Some small, tired part of me actually wanted that. But I had learned, the hard way, that with my sister, the version of events that got remembered was always the one filmed last. So I waited. Gary pulled the old deadbolt free with a soft click, held it up without a word, and reached into his bag for the new one. That click was the loudest thing I had heard all week. But to understand how I ended up standing in my own driveway, watching a locksmith hand me back the keys to my own life, I have to go back 3 days, back to a hotel room in Denver and a video I was never supposed to see. The hotel room in Denver smelled like recycled air and the lavender spray the housekeeping staff used on the pillows. I had spent the day walking a client through elevation drawings for a mixed-use building downtown, the kind of long, useful day that leaves your feet sore. I was lying on top of the covers, phone propped against my knee. It was 11 at night. The hour you tell yourself you're only going to scroll for 5 minutes. That was when the algorithm handed me my own living room. At first I didn't register what I was looking at. The video was styled the way these things always are now. Warm lighting, soft piano underneath, a caption that read, "New chapter, new home." A young woman moved through a bright, open space, trailing her fingers along a countertop, pausing in a doorway to let the camera catch the light. Then she turned. And it was Brooke. And the countertop was mine. The doorway was mine. The chair in the corner, the one I had spent 3 weeks choosing fabric for, that chair was mine too. I had picked it specifically because the light hit it a certain way at 4 in the afternoon. I sat up so fast the phone nearly slid off the bed. I watched it twice before I let myself believe it. Same floors, same window over the sink, same crack in the tile by the back door that I still hadn't gotten around to fixing. This wasn't a similar house, or a house that reminded me of mine. This was my house, filmed from angles I recognized because I had stood in those exact spots while the contractor walked me through punch lists. Brooke stopped in the middle of the living room, faced the camera, and said the words that changed the rest of my week. "This is my inheritance now," she said, smiling like she was letting the audience in on a secret. My family finally did right by me. I had to read the caption twice to make sure I hadn't misheard the audio. There was no inheritance. There had never been an inheritance. Our parents didn't have property to leave anyone, and even if they had, this house wasn't theirs to give. I had bought it myself, closed on it 11 months earlier. 8 years of saving every spare dollar, one late night and one difficult client at a time, had gone into that closing date. Nobody had handed it to me. I had earned every square foot of it, and I had never once told Brooke the closing date, let alone given her a key. which meant she had let herself in, and there was only one spare key that could have done it. The one hidden under the ceramic pot by the back steps. The one only 2 people on Earth knew about. Me and our mother. Something in my chest went very still and very cold at the same time. It wasn't just that she was in my house. It was that she had turned my private life into content. She had stood inside the 4 walls I worked a decade to afford and performed a lie about how she got there, in front of people who had no way of knowing any better. I called my mother before I had even decided what I was going to say. She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice carrying that particular brightness she used when she had already suspected why I was calling. "Mom," I said, "why is Brooke in my house?" There was a pause just long enough to tell me she already knew. "She's just doing a little video." "Honey," she said, "you know how she is. She needs the content for her partnerships. It's not like she's moving in. She told 1 million people it was her inheritance." I said, "She used the spare key." "My spare key? The one you gave her?" Another pause. I could hear her deciding which version of the truth to give me. "She's just trying to build something for herself," my mother said finally. "Can't you let her have this one thing?" I didn't answer that. I didn't trust what would come out if I did. I hung up, sat on the edge of that unfamiliar hotel bed, and understood something I had been slow to admit for years. Whatever happened next, I was going to have to handle it myself. My mother was never going to be the one standing between me and my sister. She never had been. I opened my laptop instead and started looking for my closing documents. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there running numbers I already knew by heart. Closing costs, down payment, years of eating leftovers in a 1-bedroom apartment. All of it so I could put more toward principal. By 6 in the morning I had a plan forming, and by 8, standing in the hotel lobby with a paper cup of bad coffee. I was calling Daniel Cho. Daniel had handled my closing 11 months earlier. He was the kind of lawyer who answered his own phone before 9 and never made you feel like a question was too small. "Claire," he said, "this is early, even for you. I need you to confirm something for me," I said. "Whose name is on the deed to my house?" There was a pause, the sound of a keyboard somewhere on his end. "Yours," he said. "Only yours." Why, I told him. The livestream, the word inheritance, the spare key under the flower pot. I kept my voice level the whole time. The way you do when you're trying to prove to yourself as much as anyone else that you can be calm about this. Daniel didn't interrupt. When I finished, he was quiet for a second. "Okay," he said. "Let's be clear about the legal picture first, because I don't want you operating on fear here. I want you operating on facts. There is no inheritance. There is no shared ownership. Your sister has no legal claim to that property. None, regardless of what she's telling her followers. Then why do I feel like I'm the one who has to prove something?" I asked. "Because that's how these situations always feel," he said. "But feelings aren't deeds. Deeds are deeds." He walked me through it plainly. "Change the locks immediately. Today, if possible, before she has time to establish anything resembling ongoing residency. Get a police report on file documenting unauthorized entry. Not because I needed permission to reclaim my own house, but because if this ever became a public argument, I needed a paper trail. One that existed before things got messy, not after. She's already building her version of events online," Daniel said. "You want yours sitting in an official file before she gets any further." That part landed harder than I expected. I had spent the whole night furious about the lie itself. It hadn't occurred to me yet that the lie could keep growing. If I didn't act, tomorrow's video might be Brooke crying about being locked out of her own home. And thousands of strangers would believe her before they believed me. I thanked Daniel, hung up, and called Gary. I'd used his locksmith shop once before, years earlier after losing a set of keys at the gym. He remembered me, or was polite enough to sound like he did. "I need every lock on my front and back doors replaced," I told him. "Today, if you can manage it." Gary asked the obvious question. "Everything okay? Family situation," I said. "Nothing dangerous. I just need it done quietly, and I need to be there when you do it." We settled on a time 4 in the afternoon. I hadn't told him why that specific hour mattered, but I knew. I had spent an hour that morning scrolling back through Brooke's account, and the pattern was obvious once I looked for it. She live-streamed almost every weekday between 3:30 and 5, always from somewhere staged. Always performing for an audience that had no idea how little of what she said was true. If I was going to do this, I wanted her in the house when it happened. Not because I wanted a scene, because I wanted the story to end the same way it had been told, in real time, in front of the same people she'd lied to. The last call I made was the hardest one to keep my voice steady through. I dialed the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's office and explained the situation to a dispatcher who had clearly heard versions of this before. Estranged family member, unauthorized entry, property solely in my name, locks being changed that afternoon. She didn't sound alarmed. She sounded practical, which somehow helped more than sympathy would have. "We can have a deputy in the area around that time," she said. "If there's any resistance, you'll want law enforcement present anyway, for your own protection and for the record." I gave her the address, the time window, my phone number. By the time I hung up, everything that could be arranged from 3 states away had been arranged. A lawyer who confirmed the truth, a locksmith who would act on it, a deputy who would witness it, if it came to that. All that was left was getting on a plane and finding out whether my sister would recognize the moment the story stopped belonging to her. I booked the earliest flight out of Denver, a 6:15 departure that put me on the ground with most of the day still ahead of me. I told my client I had a family matter, which was true in every sense except the reassuring one. The flight itself was 2 hours of trying not to think, which of course meant thinking about nothing else. I kept my phone in airplane mode and my eyes on the seat back in front of me. Still, I found myself replaying Brooke's video from memory. Frame by frame. The tilt of her chin when she said the word inheritance. The practiced pause before the smile. I wanted to be sure, by the time I landed, that I wasn't about to overreact to something small. I wasn't, if anything, replaying it only sharpened the anger into something colder and more useful. Somewhere over Kansas, I made myself a promise. Whatever happened at that house, I wasn't going to be the one screaming on camera. If this story ended up online, and knowing my sister it would, I wanted to be the person standing still while someone else lost control. The drive from the airport took 40 minutes, most of it along roads I could have navigated blind. I knew every turn, every stretch where the trees opened up and you could see the ridgeline in the distance. It was strange how ordinary the neighborhood looked. Mailboxes and sprinklers and a kid 2 doors down practicing free throws in his driveway, none of it aware that anything unusual was happening 4 houses over. Then I turned onto my own street, and the ordinary feeling ended. A rental car sat backed into my usual spot in the driveway, angled just slightly toward the front door. Nobody parks like that by accident. Somebody had positioned it there for a reason, the way you'd frame a shot, and I understood immediately that even the car was a prop. I parked at the curb instead, further back than I normally would, and sat there for a moment with the engine off. There is something disorienting about looking at your own house from the outside like a visitor. I noticed things I usually walked past without seeing. The way the porch light caught the brick, the hedge that needed trimming, the window box I had planted with herbs I never got around to using. It was mine down to the smallest detail, and in that moment it felt borrowed, like I was trespassing on my own life. Gary's van was already parked half a block down, tucked behind a neighbor's oversized truck where it wouldn't draw attention too early. He'd texted me 20 minutes earlier to confirm he was in position, waiting on my word. I walked over. He rolled down the window. "Whenever you're ready," he said. "No rush on my end, I checked the time. 3:42, close enough." I had spent the last 2 days learning my sister's schedule the way I used to study for exams. Methodical, thorough, looking for the pattern underneath the noise. She almost never started before 3:30, and she almost never stopped before her follower count on the video hit some number that satisfied her. If I moved now, there was a good chance I'd catch her midstream, which was exactly what I wanted, not out of cruelty. Because a live stream, unlike an edited video, couldn't be cut, reshot, or quietly deleted before anyone noticed. Whatever happened next was going to happen in front of witnesses, the same way her lie had. I nodded at Gary. "Let's go," I said. He grabbed his toolbox from the passenger seat, and together we walked up the street toward the house I had spent 8 years earning. It was now occupied by a woman selling a version of my life that had never existed. Gary crouched at the door and ran his fingers along the edge of the old deadbolt, the same builder-grade hardware every house on the street had come with. Nothing fancy, nothing that would slow him down. "Quick job," he said quietly. 10 minutes, maybe less. I stood a few feet back on the walkway, close enough to watch, far enough that I wouldn't cast a shadow across the window. Through the glass, I could see her. Brooke stood near the fireplace. Phone extended at that particular angle influencers use to flatter their own faces. A glass of wine sat in her other hand, even though it wasn't yet 4 in the afternoon. She was mid-sentence, gesturing at the mantel the way a realtor gestures at square footage, telling whoever was watching about the family finally recognizing what she deserved. I couldn't hear the words through the glass. I didn't need to. I had already heard that particular lie once, from a hotel bed 3 states away, and hearing it again in person didn't make it land any softer. Gary worked steadily behind me, the small metallic sounds of a screwdriver against brass, a faint scrape of the strike plate coming loose. It wasn't loud, but sound travels differently through an empty foyer than it does through a furnished living room, and I watched Brooke's rhythm falter, just slightly mid-gesture. She glanced toward the front door. For a second I thought she might come check. She didn't. Whatever she heard, she decided it wasn't worth breaking character for, not with however many viewers were watching her, tell them about her wonderful new beginning. She turned back to the camera, smile snapping back into place like it had never slipped. That told me something about my sister I hadn't fully understood until that moment. The performance mattered more to her than the reality underneath it. Even a strange noise at her own front door wasn't going to compete with the numbers climbing in the corner of her screen. Gary worked faster after that, like he'd sensed the same thing I had, that the window for doing this quietly was closing. The old deadbolt came free. He set it down without ceremony and reached into his bag for the replacement, already prepped with a fresh set of keys looped through a rubber band. It took him another few minutes to seat the new mechanism, testing it twice, turning the key smoothly before he was satisfied. He held the new keys out to me on his open palm. I took them, and the weight of them in my hand felt disproportionate to their size. 3 small pieces of cut metal, and as of that exact second, no one inside that house had a way out except through me. I have to admit, standing there, I let myself feel something close to relief. Not triumph, not yet. Just the quiet, physical fact of holding what was mine again. That relief lasted about 4 seconds. The front door flew open from the inside, hard enough that it bounced off the little rubber stopper on the baseboard. Brooke stood in the frame, phone still raised, still recording, the wine glass abandoned somewhere behind her. She saw me, and everything about her face rearranged itself at once. Confusion first, then recognition, then something closer to panic she was visibly trying to smooth over for the camera still running in her hand. "Claire," she said, voice pitched half a register higher than normal, "what are you doing here?" I could hear it in real time, the way she said my name loud enough for the microphone to catch it. She was already narrating this for an audience instead of actually talking to me. "I live here," I said. Behind her, through the open door, I could see the living room exactly as it had looked in the video, staged, lit, arranged for strangers to admire. Except now there was a locksmith's toolbox sitting open on my porch, and a woman standing in my doorway who was about to discover that the story she'd been telling for 3 days was over. "You can't just—" Brooke started, then stopped, glancing down at her phone as if suddenly remembering how many people were watching this unfold live. I held up the new set of keys, close enough that the sunlight caught the metal. "Actually," I said, "I can—" A car turned onto the street before Brooke had time to answer. It came in slow, the way patrol vehicles do when the driver isn't in a hurry but wants to be seen from a distance, and pulled into the curb just behind my rental. A woman in a tan and green uniform stepped out, unhurried, clipboard tucked under one arm. Deputy Ruiz, according to the name tag, arriving at almost the exact minute the dispatcher had promised. Brooke's whole posture changed. The panic I'd seen flicker across her face a moment earlier folded itself away. In its place came something more practiced. Chin lifted, eyes glossy in a way that looked rehearsed even though I doubted she'd planned for this exact scene. She turned the phone toward herself instead of toward me. "Guys," she said, voice trembling on cue, "my sister called the police on me. She's trying to have me removed from my own home." I watched the comment counter in the corner of her screen tick upward. People were typing fast, some of them clearly furious on her behalf, none of them aware they were being lied to in real time by someone who knew exactly how to sound wronged. Deputy Ruiz reached the porch steps and took in the scene without changing expression. The open toolbox, the new keys still in my hand. Two women who were very obviously related and very obviously not agreeing on anything. "Afternoon," she said. "I got a call about a property dispute. Somebody want to walk me through what's happening here?" Brooke got there first. "This is my family's house," she said. "My sister is trying to lock me out for absolutely no reason, in front of everyone who's watching right now." She said it smoothly, the sentence already shaped for an audience rather than for a deputy standing 3 feet away. I noticed she didn't lower the phone even while she was supposedly talking to law enforcement. The live stream mattered more than the conversation actually happening. Deputy Ruiz didn't react to any of that. "And you are?" she asked me. "Claire," I said, "I own this house." Brooke made a small, disbelieving sound, then reached into her bag and pulled out a second phone, screen already lit with something she'd clearly prepared in advance. She held it toward the deputy. "This proves it," Brooke said. "This is what our grandmother wanted. She always said the house would go to me when the time came, and I have it right here, in writing." Deputy Ruiz glanced at the screen without taking the phone. "What am I looking at exactly?" she asked. "A document," Brooke said. "A statement about the family's wishes." I stayed quiet. I had learned, over one very long night in a hotel room, that the version of this story which held up wasn't going to be the one told loudest. Deputy Ruiz held up a hand, the universal gesture for slow down. She looked between the two of us with the patient, unreadable expression of someone who had walked into more family arguments than she could count. Somebody who knew better than to pick a side before she had facts. "Okay," she said. "Let's not do this on the porch. Ma'am," she added, nodding at Brooke. "I hear you." "And ma'am," she said, turning to me. "I hear you too. Right now this reads like a family disagreement. And honestly, that's not really something I can referee. What I can look at is paperwork. Whoever has documentation showing legal ownership, that's what settles this, not opinions. Not what anybody remembers Grandma saying." Brooke's expression flickered. Just slightly. The first crack I'd seen since the door swung open, I reached into my bag. I had brought exactly what Daniel told me to bring, 3 days earlier. Sitting in a Denver hotel room making a list while my hands were still shaking, the notarized deed, folded once, and my driver's license, both of them ready before I'd even boarded the plane. I held them out. "Here's mine," I said. Deputy Ruiz took the folder, unfolded it, and started reading. For the first time since the door had opened, the street went almost completely quiet. Nothing but the faint sound of Brooke's live stream comments still scrolling, and the distant thud of a basketball 2 houses down that hadn't stopped once through any of it. Deputy Ruiz read slowly, the way people read when they want to be sure before they speak. Her eyes moved from the name on the deed to the name on my license, then back again. Claire Whitfield. Same address, same spelling. A recording date, 11 months old, notarized county seal pressed into the corner in a way no phone screen could fake. She looked up at me once, just briefly, and something in her expression settled. The look of someone who now had a floor to stand on. "This checks out," she said. "Recorded, notarized. Matches your ID. This is your property." Brooke's mouth opened before the deputy had even finished the sentence. "That doesn't matter," she said. "I have proof, too." She held her second phone out again, screen tilted so Deputy Ruiz could see it clearly this time. Deputy Ruiz glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds, "What is this exactly?" she asked. "It's a statement," Brooke said, "from our grandmother, about the house." "Is it notarized?" Deputy Ruiz asked. Brooke hesitated. "It's typed." "It's what she wanted." "Is it signed by anyone besides you?" Deputy Ruiz asked next. Voice even, no edge to it. Just the plain, patient tone of someone checking boxes on a form that already had a very obvious answer. Brooke didn't say anything. I watched something in Deputy Ruiz's posture change then, subtle but unmistakable. The shift from a person mediating a disagreement to a person enforcing a fact. She folded my deed carefully and handed it back to me, then turned her full attention to my sister. "Ma'am," she said, "I want to be straightforward with you. What you're showing me is a note you wrote on your own phone. It isn't a will. It isn't notarized. It has no legal standing whatsoever. What she showed me is a recorded deed with her name on it. That's not a close call." "But everyone's watching," Brooke said, voice cracking, gesturing at the phone still recording in her hand. "Thousands of people saw everything. They know what really happened." Deputy Ruiz didn't even glance at the screen. "I understand there's an audience," she said. "But a live stream isn't a courtroom, and it isn't a deed office. Comments don't transfer property, documents do. And right now, the only document either of us has seen says this house belongs to her." The silence that followed lasted long enough that I could hear, faintly, the murmur of Brooke's own comment section still scrolling behind her. Strangers typing furiously about a version of events that was already coming apart in real time. Brooke tried once more, quieter this time. "She's my sister. This is a family thing. Can't we just talk about it? We can..." Deputy Ruiz said, "just not from inside a house that isn't yours." She turned toward Brooke fully then, tone shifting into something official, unmistakable. "Here's where we stand," she said. "This home belongs to your sister, and she has the legal right to control who's inside it. Right now, you're here without her permission, which means you're trespassing. I'm going to ask you to gather your personal items and leave the property. If you do that now, calmly, this ends here. If you don't, I don't have a choice, and it becomes something more than a conversation." Brooke looked at me then, and for just a second, the performance dropped entirely. Underneath it was something rawer, something that looked almost like a plea. I didn't know what to say to it, and honestly, I wasn't sure I owed her anything to say. The phone in her hand was still recording. Whatever came next, it was going out live to every one of the people who had believed her 3 minutes earlier. Brooke turned the phone back toward her own face one last time, visibly trying to reclaim the narrative before it slipped any further away from her. "You're all seeing this." "Right," she said, voice unsteady now, in a way that sounded less rehearsed than anything else she'd said all afternoon. "My own sister, having me removed by the police over a house that should have been mine." But something had already shifted in the comments. I could see it even from where I stood. The scroll of replies no longer uniformly sympathetic. Someone had asked why she needed a fake document if the house was really hers. Someone else had simply written, "This isn't adding up." It wasn't unanimous. Not yet. But the tide had started to turn, and Brooke could feel it as clearly as I could. She lowered the phone slightly, jaw tight. "I'm not leaving my own family's house because of a piece of paper," she said. Deputy Ruiz's tone stayed even, but there was no more room for negotiation in it. "Ma'am, that paper is the only thing that matters here. I need you to start gathering your things now." Brooke didn't move. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, phone still recording. And for a long, uncomfortable moment, nobody spoke. I recognized the posture. It was the same one she'd used as a teenager whenever she decided a rule simply didn't apply to her. Feet planted, chin raised, waiting for someone else to back down first. Deputy Ruiz didn't back down. "I'm going to ask you one more time to collect your belongings and step off the property," she said. "If you refuse, I will consider that active resistance, and will handle it accordingly. That's not a threat. That's just what happens next." Brooke's composure finally cracked all the way through. She said something sharp, something I didn't fully catch, and took a step backward into the house instead of toward the door, as if putting distance between herself and the deputy might change the outcome. Deputy Ruiz moved forward calmly, said something low I couldn't hear, and reached for Brooke's wrist. What followed happened fast and, somehow, very quietly. No shouting, no struggle beyond a few seconds of Brooke twisting away before Deputy Ruiz got a firm hold. The click of the cuffs was almost polite by comparison to everything that had led up to it. Small and mechanical. Nothing like the drama Brooke had spent 3 days building for an audience. Her phone hit the porch floor, screen still lit, camera now pointed uselessly at the ceiling. Still recording, still live, broadcasting nothing but a blank rectangle of afternoon sky. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything left to say that the deed hadn't already said for me. Deputy Ruiz walked her toward the cruiser, reciting something procedural and calm. The kind of language that sounds almost gentle precisely because it's been said 1,000 times before. I stood on the porch and watched until the car door closed. And then, for the first time in 3 days, I let myself breathe out slowly. I stepped inside. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in the video. No music, no ring light glowing in the corner of the living room, no borrowed wine glass catching the light. Just my furniture sitting exactly where I'd left it, slightly rearranged for camera angles that no longer mattered. I picked up a throw pillow that had been repositioned on the wrong end of the couch and set it back where it belonged. Deputy Ruiz came back a few minutes later, clipboard in hand, and passed me a printed form. "This documents today's incident," she said. "If she contacts you again, shows up here again, or continues making claims about this property online, this report is your foundation for pursuing something civil, harassment, defamation, whatever your attorney recommends. Keep it somewhere safe." I folded it and set it on the kitchen counter, next to the mail I hadn't opened in 4 days. Outside, the rental car was still parked at its careful, camera-ready angle. Somebody was going to have to come collect it eventually. For now, it just sat there, empty. The last prop left on a stage nobody was performing on anymore. I sat down on my own couch a little after 6 that evening, and for the first time in days, nothing was happening. No calls to make, no forms to sign, no flight to catch. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the last orange light coming through the window I'd once picked out fabric to complement. I sat there and let myself actually feel the last 3 days instead of just managing them. What struck me most, sitting in that silence, wasn't the shock of the video, or even the strange theater of watching my sister get walked to a patrol car in handcuffs. It was how familiar the whole shape of it felt. I had spent most of my adult life being the one who was supposed to understand, supposed to give a little more room, supposed to let Brooke have this one thing, as my mother liked to put it. This was just the first time the thing in question had a deed attached to it, something official enough that nobody could talk me out of what was actually mine. I got up and found the number for a security company online, one that specialized in smart locks and camera systems. I scheduled an installation for the following morning, not because I was afraid of Brooke coming back. I wanted a version of my house where access was a decision I made on purpose, not a secret hidden under a flower pot that anyone in the family happened to remember. Around 8, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was my mother. "Can't you go a little easier on her?" The message read, "She's your sister. Families work things out." I read it twice. There was no mention of the lie Brooke had told a million strangers, no mention of the spare key, or the fact that I'd had to fly home and hire a locksmith just to walk into my own living room. Just the same request I'd been hearing my whole life, softened into something that sounded reasonable if you didn't look at it too closely. I didn't answer right away. I set the phone face down on the counter, next to the folded incident report Deputy Ruiz had given me. Then I went to check on the new locks Gary had installed that afternoon, running my thumb along the cool metal like I was making sure they were real. Maybe I'd write my mother back eventually. Maybe I wouldn't. Either way, that conversation could wait until I decided I was ready to have it, on my own terms, in my own time. Which was, in the end, the entire point of the last 3 days. Brooke had built an audience of 1,000,000 strangers in an afternoon, standing in a house she never paid for. Telling a story that made her the hero of somebody else's decade of work, it looked convincing. Right up until someone actually asked to see the paperwork. That's the part I keep coming back to. You can perform ownership. You can light it well, frame it beautifully, narrate it with total confidence to an audience that has no reason to doubt you. But when someone finally asks whose name is on the deed, all the performance in the world doesn't change the answer. Mine was,